The explosion shook the entire logistics building as Sarah grabbed her coffee mug to keep it from sliding off her desk. The base alarm was already wailing when the second blast hit closer, rattling the windows of the supply office where she had been processing equipment requisitions for the past 2 hours. Marine Corporal Jenkins burst through the door, his face flushed with panic. "Get to the armory now," he shouted over the sirens. "Hostile forces breached the south gate. We need to secure all weapons before they reach this sector." Sarah was already moving, her logistics uniform giving no hint of the tactical assessment running through her mind as she evaluated exit routes and defensive positions. The armory was 3 buildings over, connected by an underground tunnel that most personnel had forgotten existed. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the hallway, herding 2 other logistics clerks toward the armory entrance. "Move, move, move," he barked. "We lock down everything and wait for the cavalry." As they reached the heavy steel door of the armory, another explosion echoed from the direction of the main gate. Sarah noticed the way the sound carried, calculating distance and probable weapons based on the acoustic signature. The others were focused on getting inside quickly. The heavy armory door slammed shut behind them with a metallic clang that echoed through the weapons storage facility. Rodriguez immediately began checking the manual locks while Jenkins and the 2 clerks, Peterson and Williams, huddled near the entrance looking lost. Sarah moved deeper into the armory, her eyes scanning the organized rows of rifles, ammunition crates, and tactical equipment with an efficiency that surprised the others. She was mentally cataloging defensive capabilities when the lights suddenly cut out, leaving them in near darkness except for the emergency lighting strips along the floor. That is when they heard voices outside. Hostile forces had reached their building. Rodriguez pressed his ear to the door and whispered that at least 6 men were setting up some kind of equipment in the hallway. They were trapped. Jenkins started to panic. "We are sitting ducks in here," he muttered. "They will blow the door, and we have nowhere to run." Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the darkness with calm authority that made everyone freeze. "Negative," she said quietly. "We have the high ground, superior firepower, and they have to funnel through one entrance. This is not a trap. This is a kill zone." The way she spoke, the tactical terminology, the complete absence of fear in her voice made Rodriguez stop and stare at her in the dim emergency lighting. Rodriguez squinted at Sarah in the emergency lighting, recognition dawning across his face. "Wait a minute," he whispered. "I know that voice. You are Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell." The name hit the others like a physical blow. Williams actually stepped backward. "The Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he breathed, "the SEAL who took out that entire terrorist cell in Afghanistan single-handed." Sarah moved to the weapons rack, selecting an M4 carbine with practiced efficiency that confirmed everything Rodriguez suspected. She checked the chamber, tested the action, and loaded a magazine in movements so fluid they seemed automatic. "That was 5 years ago," she said simply, not looking up from the rifle. "Now I process supply requisitions and make sure you all have enough toilet paper." Jenkins stared at her. "But why are you working logistics if you were a decorated SEAL commander?" Sarah finally looked up, and in the dim light her expression was unreadable. "Because someone has to know where every weapon on this base is located, what condition it is in, and how to use it when situations like this arise." The sound of drilling started outside the armory door. Their attackers were preparing to breach. Rodriguez suddenly understood why a legendary SEAL had been assigned to oversee base logistics. It was not a desk job. It was strategic placement. The drilling intensified outside as Sarah began moving through the armory with purpose. She pulled tactical vests from their storage hooks and tossed them to each man. "Body armor first," she commanded. "Peterson, you know how to operate the radio equipment in here." Peterson nodded nervously. "Yes, ma'am. Basic communications training." Sarah pointed to the radio station in the corner. "Get on frequency 7 and try to raise base command. Tell them we have hostile forces attempting breach on Building C, sublevel armory. Request immediate tactical support." Meanwhile, she was pulling additional weapons from the racks, setting up what Rodriguez now recognized as defensive positions. Williams, you handled the M249 in training, correct? Williams swallowed hard. 6 months ago, ma'am. I qualified expert. Sarah slapped a machine gun into his hands along with ammunition belts. You are our heavy suppression. Jenkins, grab that shotgun and extra shells. Close quarters work only. The drilling stopped suddenly. Sarah held up her hand for silence. They were almost through. She moved to Rodriguez and handed him a tactical radio headset. Staff Sergeant, you coordinate our fields of fire. I want overlapping coverage on that entrance. Rodriguez was amazed how quickly she had transformed 4 panic logistics personnel into a defensive unit. This is what you meant about strategic placement. Peterson looked up from the radio with panic in his eyes. Ma'am, I cannot reach base command. All frequencies are jammed except emergency backup. Something about coordinated attack on multiple buildings. Sarah processed this information while checking her rifle sights. Multiple breach points means this is not random. They knew exactly what they were hitting. Rodriguez, how many personnel were in the main logistics building when we left? Rodriguez counted in his head. At least 15, maybe 20. All unarmed clerical staff. Sarah moved to a weapons crate and began pulling out flashbang grenades and breaching charges. The attackers outside had gone silent, which meant they were preparing for entry. She handed Rodriguez 2 grenades and positioned Williams behind an ammunition crate with clear sight lines to the door. Jenkins whispered urgently, Ma'am, what if they have hostages from the other building? What if they use our people as shields? Sarah paused, her tactical mind calculating possibilities. That changes our rules of engagement significantly. We need to disable, not eliminate. Williams switched to non-lethal rounds for initial contact. She moved to another weapons locker and retrieved what looked like specialized ammunition. Rubber bullets and tear gas canisters. This just became a rescue operation, not just defense. The first breach charge detonated against the armory door with a thunderous boom that shook dust from the ceiling. Sarah had positioned everyone behind concrete support pillars, but the explosion was louder than expected. Smoke began filtering under the damaged door. Williams gripped his machine gun tighter. Ma'am, that door is not going to hold much longer. Sarah was studying the armory layout with new tactical understanding. She pointed to an access panel near the ceiling. Rodriguez, that ventilation shaft connects to the main building. If they have hostages, that is our route to reach them. Rodriguez followed her gaze. But ma'am, leaving our defensive position. Sarah was already moving to another weapons cache, pulling out rappelling equipment and night vision goggles. We are not leaving. I'm going. You 4 maintain this position and make them think we are all still here. Peterson looked terrified. You cannot go alone against an unknown number of attackers. Sarah strapped on tactical gear with practiced efficiency. I have done this before. Your job is to hold this position and create enough noise to keep their attention here. When I neutralize the threat upstairs, I will signal you on Channel 9. Another explosion rocked the door. Metal began to buckle and bend. Sarah moved to the ventilation access, then looked back at her makeshift team. Sarah disappeared into the ventilation shaft just as the armory door finally gave way. Rodriguez immediately opened fire with controlled bursts, while Williams laid down suppressing fire that echoed through the concrete space. The attackers returned fire, but could not advance through the narrow doorway against their coordinated defense. Above them, Sarah crawled through the ventilation system with silent precision. Through metal grates, she could see into the main logistics building where 6 armed men in tactical gear had indeed taken hostages. 15 base personnel sat zip-tied on the floor, while 2 attackers guarded them, and 4 others prepared explosives. Sarah positioned herself above the main office area and carefully removed a ceiling grate. She could hear their leader giving orders in accented English about setting charges to destroy sensitive equipment. The hostages included several people she recognized from daily operations. Moving like liquid shadow, Sarah dropped silently into the office area behind a bank of filing cabinets. Her SEAL training took over completely as she assessed sight lines, cover positions, and threat priorities. 2 guards near the hostages, leader by the computer terminals, demolitions expert working on charges. She drew her sidearm and attached a suppressor. The first guard went down silently with a precise shot to the shoulder that dropped him unconscious. The second guard turned toward the sound, but Sarah was already moving. The second guard spun toward Sarah, but she was already inside his defensive arc. A swift strike to his throat dropped him silently before he could raise his weapon. The hostages watched in amazement as the logistics officer they had seen processing paperwork for months moved with lethal efficiency. Sarah held her finger to her lips, signaling the hostages to remain quiet. She could hear the leader still barking orders near the computer terminals, unaware that his perimeter had been compromised. The demolitions expert was focused on his explosive devices, counting down preparation time. Moving through the office furniture with practiced stealth, Sarah approached the demolitions expert from behind. She needed him alive to disarm the charges safely. A sleeper hold rendered him unconscious in seconds, and she quickly secured his radio and detonation device. The leader finally noticed the silence from his guards. "Martinez, Rodriguez, report," he called out in heavily accented English. Sarah used the captured radio to respond in the unconscious guard's voice. "All clear, Sector 2 secure." But the leader was suspicious. He began moving toward the hostage area, assault rifle ready. Sarah positioned herself behind a desk, calculating angles and timing. She had one chance to end this without endangering the captives. When he rounded the corner, Sarah was waiting. The legendary SEAL commander had returned to active duty. The leader came around the desk with his rifle raised, expecting to find his missing guards. Instead, he found Sarah Mitchell in a combat stance, her weapon trained on his center mass. For a split second, confusion crossed his face as he recognized a logistics officer from intelligence photos. "You are supposed to be a clerk," he said in broken English, his rifle wavering as tactical instinct warred with disbelief. Sarah's voice was ice cold. "I am Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy SEALs. Drop your weapon and step away from the hostages." The leader made the mistake of hesitating, trying to process how base intelligence had missed a decorated SEAL in their target assessment. That hesitation cost him everything. Sarah moved with precision that ended the threat permanently while protecting every hostage behind him. The remaining attackers in the Armory area heard the sudden silence from their leader's radio and began retreating. Sarah immediately contacted Rodriguez on Channel 9. "Threat neutralized. Hostages secure. Begin advance from your position." Minutes later, Rodriguez and the others emerged from the Armory to find Sarah calmly zip-tying unconscious attackers while base personnel worked to free their colleagues. The demolition charges had been safely disarmed and the building secured. Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. "Ma'am, remind me never to underestimate logistics personnel again." Base security arrived 20 minutes later to find the entire situation resolved. Colonel Henderson surveyed the scene with growing disbelief as Rodriguez briefed him on what had transpired. 15 hostages rescued, 6 attackers neutralized or captured, explosive devices disarmed, and 0 casualties among base personnel. The colonel looked at Sarah, who was calmly organizing evidence and coordinating with military police. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, your after-action report is going to make interesting reading." Sarah looked up from the capture intelligence materials she was cataloging. "Sir, I recommend we review base security protocols. This attack was too well-coordinated to be random. Someone provided detailed facility layouts and personnel schedules." Several of the rescued hostages approached Sarah with expressions of awe and gratitude. Peterson from Communications spoke for the group. "Ma'am, we had no idea. All this time, you were processing our supply requests and managing inventory." Williams added, "And we complained when you made us account for every round of ammunition in monthly reports." Sarah smiled slightly. "Now you understand why ammunition accountability matters. Today we had exactly what we needed because I knew where every weapon and round was stored." Colonel Henderson pulled Rodriguez aside. "Staff Sergeant, how long has she been assigned to base logistics?" Rodriguez answered quietly. 18 months, sir. We all thought it was just a desk job for a decorated veteran. Word spread through the base faster than official communications. By evening, every service member knew the story of how their logistics officer had single-handedly neutralized a coordinated attack and saved 15 lives. The tale grew with each telling, but the core facts remained unchanged. In the enlisted mess hall, Rodriguez found himself surrounded by Marines wanting details. "She moved like nothing I have ever seen," he told them. One minute, she was checking supply inventories. The next, she was running tactical operations that would make Force Recon proud. Colonel Henderson called Sarah to his office that evening. "The intelligence materials you recovered indicate this was a probe for a larger operation. Your quick thinking prevented them from gathering critical information about our defensive capabilities." Sarah nodded. "Sir, I recommend we review which personnel have access to detail-based layouts. The attack patterns suggest inside knowledge of our security rotations and building layouts." The colonel leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, I have been authorized to tell you that your logistics assignment was not coincidental. After the terrorist threats last year, Pentagon wanted our most capable operator in position to protect this facility. You have exceeded every expectation." Sarah understood now why they had placed a decorated SEAL in charge of tracking bullets and toilet paper. She had been the base's hidden guardian all along. 3 weeks later, Sarah returned to her logistics office to find her desk covered with thank you cards from the rescued hostages and their families. The base had returned to normal operations, but something fundamental had changed in how people viewed the quiet officer who managed their supplies. Jenkins stopped by with a requisition form, grinning sheepishly. "Ma'am, I promise I will never complain about inventory procedures again. Now I understand why you need to know where everything is located." Sarah signed his request with a slight smile. "Just remember, every job on this base serves a purpose. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by people you least expect." That afternoon, General Morrison arrived for an unscheduled visit. "Sarah, your actions have been noted at the highest levels. The president himself has requested a briefing on how one logistics officer neutralized a coordinated terrorist attack." Sarah remained humble. "Sir, I was simply doing my job. The real heroes were Rodriguez, Williams, Peterson, and Jenkins, who held their positions under fire despite being clerks and supply personnel. But the legend was already established. New personnel arriving at the base heard the story during orientation. The logistics officer who became a one-person army when her base needed her most. Years later, Marines would still tell the story of Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, the guardian who hid in plain sight. Have you ever had someone surprise you with hidden strength when everything seemed lost? Share your story in the comments below.